Hi everyone, I'm CARTOON-ATOR and welcome to a project I really wanted to do. Welcome to every Lucy tier list made, specifically the Lucy tier list template called every single Spongebob episode ever, and we're first doing Spongebob Season 1. So I'm going to be one of those YouTubers that review Spongebob, because that series was my favorite show in my childhood and I wanted to see how the series was over the years. I always wanted to see if the series really had a downfall, and if it had it, where did it begin? Are seasons 1 through 3 peaks of animation? Are seasons 4 and 5 the beginning of the end? Are seasons 6 through 8 the bottom of the barrel? Is SpongeBob good now? Well, all of those questions are going to be answered in this series. I was first planning that SpongeBob will be the only series I will review entirely, but then I thought myself that making reviews of SpongeBob isn't very original, because a lot of YouTubers already did that. Even this will have a very similar format to Pieguyrulz review videos. So since I'm making this review using a tier list from TierMaker, I decided to make every single tier list template from the user that made a SpongeBob episodes tier list I'm going to use, which that account is called Lucy, and most of his tier list templates are about cartoons I know very well and I'm familiar with. So I will do it like this. First, I will make the video of each season and in each video ranking all the episodes from this season. Then I will make a video ranking all the episodes from worst to best. And then I will announce the next show that I will make every tier list template that Lucy made about that show. So this will be like Pickles plus L Smart plus Hit Critic, and all the credits are going to them. Also, this tier list template also includes the movies, so I will review them and they will be in the full ranking as well. Also, I will put the tier list in the description if you want to make it. The rating system will be the tiers that are in each tier list template, and the tiers in the SpongeBob tier list are the classic S through D tier. So the rating systems are: S tier, some of the best the series has to offer, episodes that are funny, enjoyable, memorable, and with strong plot and characters. A tier, an episode that is still very good, and it's also funny and memorable, but with some weak things in it that aren't enough to put it in S tier. B tier, an episode that has some flaws, or isn't as memorable, but it's still enjoyable, has some funny moments, and still has some rewatch value. C tier, a meh episode that isn't very funny, is annoying at some parts, but still has some enjoyable and funny moments that save it from being bad. D tier, a bad episode that isn't funny, is mostly frustrating, it has bad plot, the characters are annoying, and maybe there are some funny or redeeming things, but not enough to put it in C tier. Even though the series is made in a similar format to Pieguyrulz, it has some differences. Instead of putting a fun fact, the highlight, and a quote from the episode, I will put the tier that gets the humor, characters, story, animation, pacing, impact, and SpongeBob spirit from the episode. And the tier that most appears will be the tier for the episode. The only thing that isn't changed is the picture from the episode. So let's waste no time and start with the very first SpongeBob episode, which is Episode 1A, Help Wanted. SpongeBob applies for a job at the Krusty Krab. This episode does a great job of introducing the main characters, and we immediately get a sense of their personalities. For a pilot, the plot is very engaging. The episode flows smoothly from start to finish with no dull moments. The living in the silent sequence and the scene where anchovies overrun the Krusty Krab are hilarious and make the episode truly memorable. SpongeBob grows as a character throughout the episode, and Patrick proves to be a great friend by supporting SpongeBob and encouraging him to pursue his dream. I wish Patrick had always been like that. While the series became funnier later on, and the animation looks a bit rough, that is understandable given it is the pilot, and it remains highly entertaining nonetheless. All in all, this episode deserves to go in S tier. It's one of the best pilots in animation history. Episode 1B, Reef Blower. SpongeBob attempts to move a shell off of his lawn with a reef blower. To me, this always felt like a filler episode, just there to pad this season, but when I rewatched it, I actually found it quite entertaining. For an episode with no dialogue and not much in the way of over humor, it still manages to be a fun watch. The premise might seem simple at first, but the episode shows how something as basic as trying to remove a shell can turn into an impossible challenge. SpongeBob's attempts to get rid of the shell are hilarious, like when he annoys Squidward, or when he literally sucks up all the seawater with a reef blower. The interaction between SpongeBob and Squidward is very funny, even though you might feel a bit sorry for Squidward. He was ultimately to blame since he was the one who moved the shell to SpongeBob's doorway. This episode deserves to go in B tier. Nothing special, but it's fun, and it doesn't feel like a waste of time since it's only 2 minutes long. Episode 1C, Tea at the Treedome. Spongebob meets Sandy Chicks and struggles to breathe in her Treedome. This is our introduction to Sandy. Her personality is established very well, and the concept of a squirrel living underwater was highly original for the time. The episode is generally very funny and entertaining, though it has a few slow moments such as parts where Spongebob is choking or the slow start before the main plot kicks in. However, this is understandable given that it was the first episode to be 11 minutes long. Overall, it is very enjoyable. Moments like watching SpongeBob struggle to get water is hilarious, especially the legendary "I need it" line. That's what he gets for lying about breathing air. Thought it is odd that Sandy doesn't realize SpongeBob is a sea creature that doesn't breathe air. Perhaps she assumed he was a species capable of living on the surface or something similar. The dynamic between SpongeBob and Sandy is very good, and Patrick is the best character here because of his funny moments like his choking scene and when he says, "They should call you SpongeBob Fancy Pants." This episode deserves to go in A tier. Very entertaining despite a few dull moments. Episode 2A, Bubblestand. SpongeBob starts a Bubblestand. Despite having a simple plot, this episode executes it in a very fun and entertaining way. Much like Tea at the Treedome, it starts off a bit slowly without much going on, but the second half turns into a truly fun and hilarious experience. This is the first episode to feature the classic setup where SpongeBob and Patrick are doing something, and Squidward pretends he doesn't want to join even though he actually does. It has some very funny moments and lines, such as Patrick saying, "It's a giraffe," the scene where Squidward blows a bubble, which makes me laugh every time I see it, and let's not forget the bubble blowing technique, accompanied by the line of "Bring it around town." This episode deserves to go in S tier. I highly recommend it, especially for the second half. Episode 2B, Rip Pants. SpongeBob jokes about ripping his pants. This episode delivers a great message about being yourself if you want to be accepted. Thought an even better lesson might be not to overdo a joke, as it can become tiresome, because SpongeBob takes the Rip Pants gag so far that he even uses it to fake drowning, subsequently suffering the consequences when no one wants to be around him. There are moments I don't particularly like, such as the scene where SpongeBob fakes drowning, or the episode start because of how SpongeBob is treated. But the episode becomes very entertaining and features funny moments like the first time SpongeBob rips his pants. Even though the plot has been seen in other series, what makes this episode stand out is the Rip Pants song, which is one of my favorite songs from the series. This episode goes in A tier. It features a great moral and a fantastic song, but it has a few bad moments. Episode 3A, Jellyfishing. SpongeBob and Patrick take Squidward jellyfishing. I have very mixed feelings about this episode. On the one hand, it has funny moments, like the opening sequence, the scene where SpongeBob and Patrick's in the Blue Danube while jellyfish hunting, and Patrick's line, "Firmly grasp it." But on the other hand, I consider this the first Squidward torture episode. Even though SpongeBob and Patrick didn't want to torture him, even though they apologized at the end, and even though they wanted to give him his best day ever, watching Squidward in a wheelchair, fully cased and unable to speak, while SpongeBob and Patrick don't know he isn't having fun, is uncomfortable to watch rather than entertaining. There are also moments that feel boring or dull, obviously with some exceptions as I said before, but most of the episode is boring to me, like the scene where Squidward dies as a jellyfish approaches, the scene where SpongeBob is watching the window waiting for Squidward, or the scene inside Squidward's house, are all tedious and boring. This episode goes in C tier. It isn't bad, but isn't enough to me to at least put it in B tier. Episode 3B, Plankton. SpongeBob is introduced to Mr. Krabs' business rival, Plankton. This is Plankton's introduction, and he's a great character here. The scenes where he appears has a very good suspenseful tone, thanks to the music and the fact that the episode takes place mostly at night, yet still captures the SpongeBob comedic spirit with some funny moments, like the radio player gag where Plankton plays evil music, but at one time he accidentally plays the ABC song. The plot is very interesting, and the episode is entertaining overall. It's cool seeing Plankton control SpongeBob as he moves like a robot to get a Krabby Patty, and also the scene where Plankton calls Squidward a mediocre clarinet player. However, my issue with the episode is that it can get a bit dull at times, since most of it consists of SpongeBob moving robotically towards the Krusty Krab without much else happening, like maybe with a conversation between SpongeBob and Plankton or something like that. Also, the ending was pretty predictable, as it was clear Plankton would get the secret formula. So for all those reasons, this episode goes in A tier. Very entertaining, but it could be better. Episode 4A, Naughty Nautical Neighbors. Squidward destroys SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship. I don't like the beginning of the episode because it's kinda boring, and Squidward acts like a year by causing SpongeBob and Patrick to break off their friendship through insulting bubble messages. However, the upside is that Squidward gets what he gets. Since SpongeBob and Patrick aren't friends anymore because of him, now they two compete to see who is Squidward's best friend. While I dislike seeing SpongeBob and Patrick fight, it is also satisfying because they end up torturing Squidward correctly for having caused the breakup. Squidward eventually regrets his actions and decides to make them friends again. In the end, they become friends again, but I would have preferred a reconciliation involving actual conversation and apologies, but instead they simply start burping bubbles and laughing until they destroy Squidward's house. A conclusion that feels rushed to me. Still, the episode is good because Squidward gets what he gets for ruining SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship, and let's not forget the funny moments like the meme of Patrick sleeping, SpongeBob singing to Squidward, or Patrick closing his rock and then it plays an accordion with Patrick and his rock. Between those highlights and the episode message, balanced against some weak moments, I will put this episode in B tier. Episode 4B, Boarding School. Patrick attempts to help SpongeBob pass his driving exam. This episode introduces Miss Puff, and is also the debut of the My Leg gag. It's a great introduction to Miss Puff and the boarding school, and it has a great message about not cheating on exams. The scene where SpongeBob takes the driving test while Patrick gives him the answer is entertaining and really boosts the episode's quality. However, I dislike the unfair ending for Miss Puff. Just when it seems SpongeBob is finally going to get his license, he feels guilty about cheating, causing them to crash and sending Miss Puff to the hospital. Thought at least it teaches SpongeBob a lesson about cheating. Overall, the episode is very entertaining. While perhaps not as funny as others, it still has funny moments such as Patrick calling himself Patrick SquarePants, or the scene where Patrick tells SpongeBob to act natural and SpongeBob mimics a cow. I will put this episode in A tier. It's entertaining and it's a great introduction to Miss Puff. Episode 5A, Pizza Delivery. SpongeBob and Squidward deliver a Krusty Krab pizza. This episode is excellent. Some people might consider it overrated, and while I can see why, I still think it's a highly entertaining episode from start to finish with hardly any flaws. This is exactly the kind of plot a SpongeBob episode needs. A simple plot infused with humor and fun. The interaction between SpongeBob and Squidward is fantastic here. Even though Squidward hates SpongeBob, there's still a soft in his heart for him. We see him save SpongeBob from being run over, and later defend him against the guy who yelled at him for not bringing his drink. Speaking of that guy, he's probably the only thing I didn't like about the episode. He's incredibly annoying, yelling at SpongeBob over a drink he never even ordered, when he could have just grabbed one from his house. Thought at least Squidward gives him what he deserves. The visuals are the episode's highlight. While they lack detail and look like a barren wasteland, that choice effectively captures the fear of being lost and helpless. We see SpongeBob and Squidward embarking on an adventure in unknown territory entirely on their own. SpongeBob isn't annoying here, he's hilarious and charismatic, with memorable moments like the Krusty Krab pizza song or the scene where he says, "It's not just a boulder, it's a rock." This episode is clearly going to S tier. It's a great watch with no dull. Episode 5B, Home Sweet Pineapple. SpongeBob's pineapple is consumed by nematodes. To be honest, I used to remember this episode as somewhat forgettable and boring, but upon rewatching it, I actually had a really good time. My issues with it are, first, the sequence where SpongeBob tries to sleep at Patrick's house feels a bit dull and suffers from pacing problems. It also makes you feel bad for SpongeBob because he didn't deserve that treatment. Second, Squidward is awful here. I mean, I know his personality involves hating SpongeBob, but for this being Pizza Delivery's sister episode, it's jarring to see him celebrating SpongeBob leaving town while SpongeBob is about to go with his parents and Patrick is crying. Eventually, thought a tear from SpongeBob falls into a seed, causing a pineapple to grow and Squidward gets his punishment. Despite that, the rest of the episode is very enjoyable, especially the scene where SpongeBob and Patrick build a new house and Patrick keeps hitting his finger. There are also funny moments like Patrick realizing SpongeBob's house is gone, even though SpongeBob had already said so, or Squidward celebrating and Patrick says that SpongeBob leaving affected him. And also the moment Squidward realizes SpongeBob is going to sleep with him, which spawned the meme of Squidward's eyes. Plus, seeing Squidward get what he deserves at the end for celebrating a SpongeBob is leaving is satisfying. This episode goes in A tier. It's entertaining but not particularly special. Episode 6A, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. SpongeBob and Patrick try to convince their heroes to come out of retirement. I consider this episode underrated. I mean, I don't see anyone calling it a bad episode, but I also don't see people putting this among their favorites. This episode has very funny moments and might just be the best character introduction episode. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are hilarious here, especially Mermaid Man when he shouts, "Evil!" or when he marries SpongeBob and the Sadie Soul's manager and says, "You may kiss the bride." There are also really entertaining scenes, like when Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy fight with SpongeBob and Patrick, or when they first meet the heroes and Mermaid Man thinks they are the TV repairmen. Also, the plot is very original, and while SpongeBob and Patrick can be a bit annoying, it's understandable here, because they want Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy to come out of retirement. Many of us have probably done the same thing with our idols that retired, like when Pieguyrulz retired in 2022. And the episode, rather than mocking the elderly, the episode handles the subject in a fun, light-hearted way. This episode is going in S tier. It's an underrated gem in my opinion. Episode 6B, Pickles. SpongeBob loses his confidence after forgetting to put the pickles on a Krabby Patty. When you watch this episode as a kid, you like it for the funny scenes and lines, or for the showdown between SpongeBob and Bubblebuzz. And yes, those moments are very enjoyable, but when you watch it as an adult, you appreciate it because you relate to SpongeBob. In real life, it's possible to forget something you do all the time, causing you to lose your mind and forget how to do basic things. And the episode handles this with SpongeBob's signature comedic charm, like him forgetting how to sleep, putting a bicycle in the oven, or putting his underwear on his face, which features a hidden detail for adults. Beyond that, there are great lines such as when a fish asks Squidward if he has salt and if he can check, and Squidward says, "No," or when he says to Bubblebuzz, "We serve food here, sir." Plus, the scene where SpongeBob tries again to serve a Krabby Patty to Bubblebuzz, making sure not to forget the pickles, feels like a classic Wild West movie scene. The only thing I don't like is Bubblebuzz, as I find him to be very annoying, but at least he gets what he deserves at the end. This episode goes in S tier. It's relatable and very enjoyable. Episode 7A, Hall Monitor. SpongeBob takes his role as the hall monitor of Miss Puff's boarding school too far. I always consider this overrated because I found SpongeBob very annoying and irritating, and I didn't understand why people like it so much. However, when I rewatched it for this video, even though SpongeBob still annoyed me and, albeit unintentionally, hurt innocent people, the second half improved for me. It turned into a mystery plot where SpongeBob tries to find the maniac without knowing he's the maniac. The episode also became better thanks to Patrick. He's a hilarious character with great moments, like when SpongeBob asks him what they should do, and Patrick suggests buying ice cream, not once but twice. There's also the scene where the police show Patrick the image of the maniac, and Patrick starts screaming when he sees it. And overall, Patrick is very charismatic here. The highlight is the scene where Patrick tells SpongeBob where the maniac is, and SpongeBob hides in that spot. Even though the second half made the episode better, I didn't like the ending because it was unfair to Miss Puff, because even though she was the one who gave SpongeBob the hall monitor role, SpongeBob was the one who truly deserved punishment, since he destroyed the city and broke into people's homes. In conclusion, I found the first half bad and the second half very good, so I'm putting the episode in B tier. I only recommend the second half where Patrick appears. Episode 7B, Jellyfish Jam. SpongeBob brings home a jellyfish, creating chaos. The plot of adopting a wild animal as a pet only to realize it was a bad idea is something we've seen in other series, and the episode doesn't have many funny moments either. However, what earns it points are the musical sequences. Both the music and the visuals are striking and well executed. First, there's the scene where SpongeBob dances with the jellyfish, and later when he takes them to jellyfish fields to set a wreath created by Gary's eyes, sea objects, and a clam chorus. And there are no slow or boring moments. But what keeps it out of S tier is that I found the jellyfish to be very annoying characters. I know they act that way so SpongeBob realizes his mistake, but they still irritate me, especially when they sting Squidward, bring his clarinet, and dance around it. As I mentioned, there aren't any moments where I laugh, but that doesn't make the episode boring. On the contrary, the music makes it very entertaining. So for all those reasons, this goes in A tier. Thought I don't recommend watching the scene where SpongeBob dances with the jellyfish in a dark room. Episode 8A, Sandy's Rocket. SpongeBob and Patrick sneak onto Sandy's rocket ship. I found SpongeBob and Patrick really stupid here. I know there are characters made for being stupid, but come on, literally don't realize the rocket malfunctioned and send them back to Earth, and then think aliens trick them by impersonating their friends, strikes me as just too silly, especially for the SpongeBob and Patrick from this season. I also dislike how they start adopting everyone without any proof that the people are disguised aliens, including people who aren't actually doing anything wrong. I was almost putting this one in C tier, but what bumps it up to B tier are the visuals of Sandy's rocket ship. They are well crafted and eye-catching. I also enjoy the scene with SpongeBob and Patrick sign the rocket. It's a fun moment between them. But another thing I didn't like was the opening of the episode because it felt boring and unforgettable, and for an episode titled Sandy's Rocket, Sandy barely appears in it. So the first half felt boring, the middle was fun, and the second half was somewhat mean-spirited. Episode 8B, Squeaky Boots. SpongeBob buys boots from Mr. Krabs, which causes an annoying squeaky sound. At first, I didn't remember the squeaking of the boots being as annoying as everyone said, but when I rewatched the episode, my god, that squeaking was there almost the entire time. It isn't too irritating the first times, but it just keeps going and going, becoming exhausting to listen to. However, what keeps this episode in C tier rather than D tier is the plot. It's actually not bad, and it works because Mr. Krabs gets what he deserves because he told SpongeBob that only the best fry could wear those boots, just to get him to buy them. There are also funny moments like the scene where Mr. Krabs tries to close his bedroom window because the air makes it sound just like the boots squeaking and keeps him awake. But I don't know if I'm the only one, but it makes me a bit uncomfortable when Mr. Krabs gets his feet stuck in a hole, slips, and loses his feet. It's not gross, but the thought of that happening to me makes me uneasy. Thought at least it's not as uncomfortable as the toenail scene from House Fancy. But without a doubt, the best part of the episode is Mr. Krabs' paranoia sequence, featuring rapid-fire shots from the episode and a terrified look on his face, which was really well made, especially for those years. What wins it is that the squeaky sound persists. That noise is supposed to be annoying for the characters in the episode, not for the viewers. If it wasn't for that sound, I might have even placed this episode in S tier or A tier. Also, this is Pearl's first appearance, but season very Episode 9A, Nature Pants. SpongeBob gives up a mother life to live with the jellyfish. The episode where SpongeBob becomes Soterian. Honestly, I don't get why people like this episode. I found it very forgettable and almost nothing happens. Most of it consists of SpongeBob going buzz buzz, buzz buzz, and realizing he can't actually live with the jellyfish. He acts like a jerk by telling his friends he's going to start a new life living with the jellyfish, and he even doesn't give a reason why. He just had a dream about him hanging around with them, and he doesn't care that his friends, especially Patrick, feel bad for him. There's also a lack of jokes, though there are a few fun moments, like the scene where Patrick tries to catch SpongeBob, which is the only entertaining part, and it features the evil Patrick face meme. Or when Patrick says that even Squidward misses him, and then Squidward appears happy having a party. And overall, Patrick makes this episode more funny. The episode also has a good message about not trying to live like an animal because bad things can happen, and it has a sweet ending where SpongeBob hugs his friends. So I'm putting it in C tier. It has a good message, but I also found it forgettable. Episode 9B, Opposite Day. Squidward tells SpongeBob and Patrick that it's opposite day. Actually, the synopsis the Encyclopedia SpongeBob put here is wrong, because Squidward only tells SpongeBob what opposite day is. SpongeBob is the one that tells Patrick what it is, but anyway. Some people call this a Squidward torture episode, and while I do feel bad for him at the end, it was his own fault for telling SpongeBob about opposite day. And SpongeBob and Patrick took it way too seriously and did everything in an opposite way. Plus, the episode is really entertaining. It's funny watching them do everything opposite, especially when they impersonate Squidward and assume everything happening is part of the opposite day game. Like when they start destroying SpongeBob's house and Squidward decides to fix it and makes SpongeBob confused. He says that since they fixed his house by wrecking it and Squidward is now repairing it, that must mean Squidward is actually destroying it. That part always cracks me up. There's also the moment where the real estate agent, who by the way was revealed to be named Janet in an episode of the Patrick Star Show, think it's a prank because everyone looks like Squidward. Overall, it's a simple yet very funny episode, so I'm putting it in S tier. The only downside is that Squidward really deserved what happened to him at the end. But Episode 10A, Culture Shock. Squidward hosts a talent show at the Krusty Krab. The episode features a highly innovative concept for the series, seeing the characters perform on stage, and is made even more interesting by funny moments like when Pearl belts out the Krusty Krab lyrics and sends everyone flying through the air, or when Squidward is introduced in the show and Patrick can't stop laughing. But what really made me burst out laughing was the scene where Squidward performs, a moment that became a meme. Everyone starts pelting him with tomatoes, and since SpongeBob is in charge of cleanup, he starts mopping the floor and the crowd applauds him. Yet they go stoneface the moment Squidward shows up. There's even a moment where Squidward tries sweeping just like SpongeBob, someone throws a tomato at him, and when SpongeBob simply scoops the tomato into the dustpan, the crowd starts cheering for him. It's not just funny for the sake of it, though Squidward deserved it for acting so selfishly, claiming without proof that everyone was only there to see him, treating SpongeBob like trash, and refusing to let him participate in the show. Seeing everyone praise SpongeBob while rejecting Squidward is very satisfying, so I'm putting this episode in S tier. The plot is very interesting and the ending is both satisfying and hilarious. Episode 10B, Fun. SpongeBob befriends Plankton because he thinks he's lonely. This episode is best remembered for the song, and it's easy to see why. It's very catchy and it has a great rhythm. It's a song I could listen to over and over. But beyond that, the episode itself has a touching quality, blended with SpongeBob's humor. Seeing SpongeBob feel bad for Plankton and want to be his friend is really sweet, and many people will likely do the same for someone who's lonely, especially back in school days. It also delivers a solid message about the risks of trusting someone who isn't truly your friend, as they might betray you. That's what Plankton does here. He ultimately reveals he wants to be evil and runs away with a Krabby Patty. Thought he gets his punishment after that. The dynamic between SpongeBob and Plankton is excellent. It's probably one of my favorites in the whole show. The episode also has plenty of jokes and funny moments, like the opening sequence where SpongeBob chases a Krabby Patty all over town, or the scene where Plankton betrays SpongeBob, and in the movie that they were watching a couple appears on screen and the girlfriend says, "Oh darling, I knew nothing will ever tear us apart," and right then Plankton bursts through the screen and literally tears them apart. All of that, combined with the song, lands this episode in S tier. While some people love it solely for the song, which is fantastic, but the episode itself is heartwarming and relatable. Episode 11A, Musclebob Buffpants. SpongeBob orders fake arms with inflatable muscles to impress Sandy. The episode has the message of not to pretend something you aren't, and it does it well. The fake muscle SpongeBob buys are just for show and don't actually make you strong. He realizes his mistake when Sandy signs him up for an ankle lifting competition. There are also funny moments, like when SpongeBob imagines living his life as a muscle-bound guy, or when the guy that measures the distance of the anchors at the competition has to run to avoid being crushed by the anchors. However, I have issues with the episode. I don't like the beginning of it because I feel Sandy goes too far with SpongeBob's training, making him fight, run in a hamster wheel, and even stick his hands into a crushing machine. SpongeBob ends up running away with sore arms, and it makes me feel bad for him. Also, the plot is something we've seen many times before. They could have handled it more original, perhaps by not having SpongeBob act like a jerk. As is often the case when a character fakes having something, he acts arrogant and brags about muscles he knows aren't real, which feels out of character for him. Still, he gets what he deserves in the end. When everyone discovers the muscles are fake, Sandy makes him do the most extreme exercise. That's right, pressing a remote control button. And he struggles so much that his arms fall off. He certainly deserved that for acting so cocky. Overall, the episode lands in B tier. It has a good message and entertaining parts, but it could have been more original, and I didn't like SpongeBob. Episode 11B, Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. Squidward pretends to be a ghost after SpongeBob and Patrick think he's dead. I can understand why some people like this episode, but honestly, I'm not very crazy about it. It's not a bad episode or anything, but in my opinion, it's somewhat forgettable and didn't strike me as very funny. Don't get me wrong, there are funny moments, like the watermelon gag, or when Squidward is about to reveal to SpongeBob that he isn't a ghost, takes off his cap to confess something, and since he's bald, SpongeBob says, "You're bald?" That part was good, but overall, I found the episode boring with not many things happening, and the pacing felt slow, especially in the first half. Squidward also was very annoying here. He treats SpongeBob and Patrick like slaves because they think he's a ghost after accidentally knocking over and melting the statue Squidward made of himself, and they agree to do whatever he wants, and he takes the advantage of that by bossing them around. He gets irritated to the point where he makes SpongeBob hold a piece of paper and stand up all night, only to scold him the next morning for falling asleep. There's also another point that is minor, but I like to mention. The plot is interesting, but it feels a bit dark for SpongeBob. I know they don't handle it in a dark way, they keep the show's innocent humorous tone, but the premise of SpongeBob and Patrick thinking they killed someone, in this case Squidward, and then believing he's a ghost feels a little odd for the series. Still, they don't take it too seriously. By the way, another thing I want to mention, that it doesn't affect the rating, is a part in the beginning where SpongeBob uses bubbles to spell out G7, and a lot of people think he said 6-7, and they claim that SpongeBob predicted the 2025 meme. Anyway, I'm putting the episode in the upper side of C tier. It's not bad and has some funny jokes, but there are definitely better ones. Episode 12A, The Chaperone. SpongeBob takes Pearl to the prom. This isn't Pearl's first appearance, but it is her first major one, and honestly, it's decent. There are jokes like SpongeBob balancing on his long legs, the chaos doing the Sponge song scene, where a giant living tomato chases a girl, or the gag involving the motionless figure that looks exactly like SpongeBob. Despite that, I found the rest of the episode somewhat forgettable. SpongeBob ends up being unintentionally annoying her by ruining Pearl's prom, which makes you feel bad for her. However, she doesn't get mad at him and forgives him, which is sweet in my opinion. And while the episode has good jokes, it didn't exactly make me laugh out loud, and there are funnier episodes out there. I was about to put it in C tier, but what makes it go in B tier, aside from the jokes and interesting chance to know more about Pearl, is the Doing Sponge song. It's very catchy and the most memorable thing about the episode. There's also the cow scene, which is fun too, featuring funny moments like the tomato I already mentioned, two fish merging their bodies and heads, and fish ending up in the hospital, which is ridiculous in a good way. Also, as a fun fact, Pearl had an nerdy and chubby boyfriend named Octavio Rex. Now is when they add him in a modern episode, just like they do with almost every classic one of character. Anyway, this episode is solid. It has good moments and an interesting plot, which is like a teen sitcom plot mixed with SpongeBob's tone, though I do have some issues with it. Episode 12B, Employee of the Month. SpongeBob and Squidward compete for the Employee of the Month award. I really enjoy the rivalry between SpongeBob and Squidward here. Watching them set traps for each other and scramble desperately to become Employee of the Month is very entertaining and reminds me of the slapstick humor of Looney Tunes. And even though there aren't many laugh out loud jokes and the opening felt a bit slow, the episode is still very fun overall. Also, I do find the part where SpongeBob sneaks into Squidward's house at night a bit creepy. Honestly, that should be considered illegal, don't you think? Come to think of it, it's strange how often characters can just enter into someone's house without keys or anyone open the door for them. But I can't take that too seriously, since it's just a cartoon. Moving on, despite this episode being a fun experience, I have two issues with it. I didn't like the ending because Mr. Krabs didn't deserve to have the Krusty Krab destroyed by SpongeBob and Squidward in their desperation to win the award, and then appear Krabby Patties raining from the sky and the customers can eat them for free, something Mr. Krabs can't accept. I also find it confusing that Squidward suddenly changes his mind about the award for no reason. He starts saying that it's stupid, but then suddenly does everything he can to win it. Still, overall, I rank the episode in A tier. I especially recommend the sequence where SpongeBob and Squidward race to see who can get to the Krusty Krab. Episode 13A, Scaredy Pants. SpongeBob becomes a ghost for Halloween. This episode really makes you feel like it's Halloween, even when you aren't watching it on the actual day. And it's fun seeing the characters in various costumes, especially Sandy when she tells Squidward she's dressed as a fish in a bowl, and clearly he doesn't get it, since he's a sea creature who doesn't know that land creatures keep fish as pets. As for the episode itself, the plot might not be the most interesting thing, but its core point thanks to its Halloween atmosphere combined with the show's humor. Honestly, I didn't remember it being really that funny, but it definitely has its moments, like the joke about the haunted mattress and sleeping bag, Patrick saying, "I don't know who I am," or the scene where a jellyfish stings Patrick, causing him to run off and drop the rope holding SpongeBob up, revealing the one who was saying he's the Flying Dutchman was actually SpongeBob. And there's also the moment where Squidward dressed as the Flying Dutchman says to SpongeBob, "I've come for your pickle," when he's referring to his soul. But he says he's pickle because Mr. Krabs had disguised a bag of pickles as a bag of souls. But if you hear that out of context and have a dirty mind like I do, you might think Squidward is referring to something else from SpongeBob. But the best part happens at the end when the Dutchman takes SpongeBob his costume off, and it turns out the reason the costume was round shaped was that Patrick had actually cut off the top of SpongeBob's head, leaving his brain exposed. And everyone runs away, including Patrick, once he realizes it's SpongeBob's brain and not a hat, which is a creepy little, but it's funny. My only issue with the episode is that it makes me angry at the beginning when the characters mock SpongeBob by calling him Scaredy Pants. And while it feels mean-spirited, it works for the plot, and at least it only happens at the beginning. And the episode turns into a fun story about SpongeBob and Patrick, so I'm putting this episode in S tier. Episode 13b, I Was a Teenage Gary. SpongeBob leaves Gary in the care of Squidward. Before reviewing the episode, I want to say this episode goes in D tier. It's the first one in the series I consider to be bad. It has funny jokes like when the doctor says, "Indeed, it's a snail," and SpongeBob says, "I knew it, did you hear that, Squidward?" Or at the end when Gary, SpongeBob and Squidward, when they are turning into snails, are singing at night, and Patrick comes out saying, "Can you please climb up?" But the episode as a whole has a very confusing plot, and the characters don't help matters at all. At first, it seemed to be about SpongeBob and Patrick leaving Squidward in search of Gary, and Squidward ignoring the responsibility, then about SpongeBob and Squidward figuring out how to cure Gary, and then about SpongeBob turning into a snail after being injected with snail plasma and chasing Squidward. It feels like the writers just keep adding elements to the plot. While they are connected, it's very hard to pin down the episode's main plot. There are also inconsistencies, like the fact that you can turn into a snail if injected with the plasma, yet no reason is given for why that happens. Will Gary turn more into a snail if injected with it? And why didn't the doctor inject Gary himself? Do the owners have to do it? Another thing, Squidward looks like a jerk here. He doesn't care about Gary for a single second. He just wanted to take advantage of SpongeBob and Patrick being away for the weekend to do what? Take a nap and sunbathe for the entire 48 hours. He only decides to quickly feed Gary, who's already completely malnourished, when he sees SpongeBob and Patrick returning. But the final straw is the scene where SpongeBob transforms into a snail. I didn't remember it being so grotesque, but when I rewatched it, oh my god, what on earth is that? It's really disgusting and unpleasant, especially when his eyes pop up in a grotesque and uncomfortable way. I read on the episode's page on the Spongebob wiki that the scene was intentionally gross, but did it really need to be so uncomfortable to watch? I don't even want to imagine what the scene where Squidward transforming was like. If SpongeBob's was already horrible, I don't even want to think about Squidward's since it was eliminated. Also, why did SpongeBob go to Squidward's house when he's transformed into a snail? Did he want to annoy him? Did he want to tell him what happened? Who knows? And while Squidward did what he deserves for not caring for Gary, it feels bizarre rather than satisfying. Thanks to the funny jokes and the Halloween vibe the episode wanted to give, it lands in the middle of D tier, but it's proof that even the early seasons had their flaws. Episode 14a, SP129. Squidward accidentally freezes himself to the future. As is often the case, the episode starts off feeling a bit slow, and SpongeBob and Patrick can be annoying. However, it's funny when SpongeBob constantly asks Squidward if he's ready yet, and at least it isn't filler and has to do with the plot. Furthermore, the episode turns into a very fun adventure where Squidward travels to various eras just to play his clarinet in peace. And although the time travel plot has been seen in a lot of series and movies, it doesn't feel generic here, since it all begins with Squidward hiding in the Krusty Krab freezer to escape SpongeBob and Patrick, only to get trapped inside with no one coming to look for him until 2000 years later, where a future version of SpongeBob called Spongetron thaws him out and tells him to use a time machine to return to his own time period. And that's when the adventure truly begins. What makes the episode stand out are the visuals, which are incredible and beautifully designed. Both the chrome-plate future and the prehistoric setting have nice vibes, and the design of the lower dimension evokes a sense of total isolation and being completely lost. The same feeling Squidward was having to the point where he admits he even misses SpongeBob. The episode also features funny things, such as the primitive versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, which by the way aren't SpongeBob and Patrick from the episode Arrgh, And also, the plot twist from the end when Squidward asks who came up with the idea of jellyfishing, and SpongeBob and Patrick tell him that it was him, which is true since he said the primitive sponge and star how to catch a jellyfish. This episode clearly goes in S tier. We've gone from a bad episode to a truly masterpiece. Episode 14B, Karate Choppers. SpongeBob and Sandy's karate disturbs the Krusty Krab. In case you didn't know, there's a rumor that this episode has a hidden adult joke. The idea that the word karate is standing for what couples do when they want to have a child, and people often swap the word karate for that other one. Honestly, it's fun to watch the episode with that perspective in mind, though when viewed normally it's nothing special, and the episode doesn't have many jokes, but watching SpongeBob and Sandy doing karate and the various ways they do it are still enjoyable. And just like in Red Pants, the episode knows when the gag is getting annoying, and it stopped teaching SpongeBob a lesson for annoying others. However, I don't get why Mr. Krabs fired SpongeBob. Sure, he has warned him that he'd be fired if caught doing karate again, but this time SpongeBob wasn't actually doing karate. Sandy was the one hitting him, and he was standing without doing anything. So I don't understand why he got fired. Even though the episode lacks jokes, it still has fun moments, like SpongeBob and Sandy trying and failing to do something other than karate, or the drop of sauce with Tom Kenny's face. And the final scene is very funny. Sandy says, "I love karate." SpongeBob says, "I love karate." Mr. Krabs says, "I love money, eh?" And then Squidward says, "I hate all of you." I would give the episode more points if it had more jokes, or if SpongeBob actually deserved to be fired, so I'm putting it in B tier. It's entertaining, but nothing special. Episode 15A, Sleepy Time. SpongeBob visits the dreams of others. Just like SB129, this episode features striking visuals. Each dream scenario is unique, and effectively represents the character that is having it. My personal favorite is Gary's, because we discover he's more intelligent than he looks, and we even hear him speak, and the setting itself is amazing. The plot of the episode is very original, and there isn't any moment I feel bored. Thought it would have been nice to see Miss Puff's dream, as she is the only character of the main cast whose dream isn't shown. In fact, she actually appears some seconds in SpongeBob's dream, where she tears up his driver's license. A good episode has its funny moments, and this one's no exception, like when Patrick loses a nickel in his dream, or when in Squidward's dream SpongeBob decides to be his clarinet, and everyone praises him even though he was just singing la 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 la, a scene that kinda reminds me of Culture Shock. I have only one problem with the episode, which is that SpongeBob can get a bit annoying as he ruins most of his friends' dreams without them deserving it, with the exception of Plankton. But at least he didn't do it on purpose, and in the end everyone goes to his house to confront him. Also, how did they know SpongeBob had entered their dreams? I can get it with Pearl since he actually told her, but what about the others? Didn't they think they might have just imagined him? Anyway, despite that, this episode goes in S tier. It has a truly original concept with incredible dreamscapes. Episode 15B, Suds. SpongeBob catches the Suds after leaving his refrigerator open. One detail I found curious about the episode is that in the very beginning SpongeBob is asleep and having a dream, and since this is Sleepy Time's sister episode, it looks like it chronologically happens right after that episode. Though that doesn't really matter, it was just an interesting detail. As for the episode itself, I don't like seeing SpongeBob suffer most of it, since he didn't make something to deserve it, and his appearance when he gets the Suds is very strange, and not in a funny way like when he was drowning in the Treedome. However, just like with Hall-Monitor, what makes this go to B tier instead of C tier is Patrick, because even though he only makes SpongeBob's situation worse and tells him not to go to a real doctor, he's still a very funny character. Like when he tells SpongeBob that the worst thing about going to the doctor is having to read all magazines, or his attempts to cure SpongeBob rather than being frustrating is actually very funny. I also find it funny when Patrick and Sandy spin SpongeBob and bounce him like a ball. I don't know, that cracks me up. But the best part is the sports treatment made in live action. And then SpongeBob gets a lollipop. And since Patrick also wants a lollipop, says that he also wants a treatment, but hands make him do disgusting things like cleaning a toilet or petting a cactus, which he deserved that for telling SpongeBob not to go to the doctor. Overall, even though the episode is a bit cruel to SpongeBob, it's redeemed by its funny moments. Episode 16A, Valentine's Day. SpongeBob and Sandy try to give Patrick a Valentine's Day gift at the carnival, but troubles arise when the gift is late. One thing I've noticed about this season is that some episodes that were close to being shittier ended up in better thanks to Patrick, such as Suds or Hall Monitor, but here is the exact opposite. In my opinion, this is Patrick's first bad appearance. While he wasn't exactly the most likable character in Once Before This, at least he wasn't very annoying and still was funny. But here, he behaves in a very irritating way from start to finish. First, he doesn't stop asking SpongeBob what his gift is, and then, when SpongeBob tells him his gift is just a handshake, which was a lie, he gets extremely angry and he starts destroying everything. Look, I get why he behaved like that. I'd be mad too if I saw someone that considers me his best friend giving me a simple handshake as a gift, while he gives better ones to people he even met that exact same day. I can understand that. But even so, he starts hurting innocent people who had nothing to do with the situation and hadn't done anything wrong. Also, why did SpongeBob tell him the gift was a handshake, instead of waiting for Sandy to bring the hot air balloon? I know Sandy was having trouble with it, but that still wasn't the best thing to do. But the reason I put this episode in B tier instead of C or D is because the other things in this episode are actually very good. The other characters such as SpongeBob and Sandy are very likable, and even if Patrick was annoying here, he still has some funny moments, like when he thinks SpongeBob is trapped in a rock, the Mount climb and fall off Gat, or even in the scene where he gets extremely angry and hurts people, has some funny parts, or parts that give me a smile, like when he destroys a guy's hair costume he was wearing, or when he throws gas, which, even though it's mean-spirited, it made me giggle a bit. I also really like the opening sequence where SpongeBob gives everyone a gift, and the visuals of the Valentine's Day Carnival are beautiful and eye-catching. It has really good things, and the bad things at least have reasons to exist. Also, the plot is very original for a Valentine's Day episode, and it's not your typical love story. But I agree with Braden in saying that instead of being a Valentine's Day, it could be an episode of Patrick's birthday instead. Episode 16B, The Paper. SpongeBob plays with Squidward's bubblegum grabber. This episode is like Reef Blower but with voices and during 11 minutes, since both are about SpongeBob playing with an object and makes Squidward get annoyed. In fact, I wonder why they didn't make this a short and turn Valentine's Day into a 15-minute episode. That wouldn't have been a bad idea, but probably back then they didn't think of making episodes that are longer than 11 minutes. Anyway, I've seen some people dislike this episode and they say it's boring, but I don't find it like that, because even though the plot is indeed very simple and most of it is about SpongeBob playing with the paper, rather than boring or repetitive, it's actually very fun. His ways of playing with it are creative, like when he makes various shapes with his tongue, and when Squidward trades the paper around his shirt with SpongeBob and tries to do the same, it fails. Or when he plays Bullfighter with Gary. The episode also has its funny moments, such as SpongeBob acting like a jungle man making dolphin and walrus sounds, or the scene where Squidward proves that paper can't play music like his clarinet, and it results that even that paper plays better music than it. And that scene became a meme called Grown Notes. There may be some Squidward torture in here, but more than being frustrating, it's actually very enjoyable. In fact, it was his fault for throwing away the wrapper to SpongeBob's house without learning what happened in Reef Blower when he moves a cell into his lawn. This is also an episode where Squidward says he doesn't care for what SpongeBob is playing, but he actually wants to, and he even gives everything from him to SpongeBob just to he give him the paper. And it's also funny to see Squidward trying to do the paper trick SpongeBob did, like when he says, I'm flying. Overall, it's a simple yet fun SpongeBob and Squidward plot. Thought it could have been better with more humor or more interesting things happening, so I'm putting it in B tier. Episode 17A, Arrgh. Mr. Krabs takes SpongeBob and Patrick on a treasure hunt. At first, I used to think this episode deserved to go in A tier, because Mr. Krabs got so annoying and self-centered. However, upon rewatching it, I found it to be a fun adventure about SpongeBob, Patrick and Mr. Krabs, packed with memorable jokes and moments. Like the quiz joke, and the scene I found funnier than before was the one where Mr. Krabs wants to still play the board game with SpongeBob at his house, and every time SpongeBob sees him, he's shaking the dice, and then he says, Mr. Krabs, I wanna go to bed. While it's true Mr. Krabs can get annoying, saying to SpongeBob and Patrick that since he's the captain, he should keep the treasure, even though they found it first, and then sacrifice them to the Flying Dutchman by saying they were the ones who discovered it. But at least it's satisfying to see him getting his karma when the Dutchman gives SpongeBob and Patrick 2 gold doubloons. but give Mr. Krabs success made of plastic. Overall, this episode goes in S tier. It's enjoyable from start to finish and a great way to pass the time. Episode 17B, Rock Bottom. Spongebob gets stuck in rock bottom after taking the grown bass home. What makes this episode so memorable are the visuals of rock bottom and its inhabitants, which are based on deep sea creatures and create a sense of solitude and tranquility. And while that's excellent, what about the rest of the episode? Well, it's great too. Although there's some cruel Spongebob torture, it's actually entertaining rather than irritating. It's very fun to see his attempts to catch the bass, like when he loses his balloon and runs to get it back, or when he tries to get a candy from the vending machine. And that's made by that way to represent the feeling of being lost in a dark unknown place and you think you will never escape. And it's done very well combined with the humorous tone of the series. Is this episode funny? Not very much, but it didn't have to, and it's still very enjoyable. I'll rank it higher in my list if it had more jokes, but still deserves to go in S tier. But I consider it a bit overrated if you ask me. Episode 18A, Texas. Sandy feels homesick and wants to return to Texas, and Spongebob and Patrick want to cheer her up. This is an episode you can feel identified, as it talks about the topic of missing something you love and makes you don't want to talk to anyone and try to go back to those times. And it handles this in a very heartwarming way, with Spongebob, Patrick and the other characters trying to cheer Sandy up and help her feel comfortable where she is. It also has a beautiful song that almost made me cry, something that hadn't happened to me with this season before. And of course, there are funny moments, like the Texas jokes, the Patrick's genius jokes, and the scene where Sandy chases Spongebob and Patrick is very entertaining. The only thing I didn't like was the scene where Spongebob and Patrick start making fun of Texas in Sandy's face. Thought I supposedly to convince her to stay in Bikini Bottom, or to make her chase them to the Krusty Krab to show her the surprise. Overall, it's a sweet episode and very funny as well. It definitely goes in S tier. Also, I wonder if anyone from Texas might be offended with the damn old Texas jokes. Episode 18B, Walking Small. Plankton tricks Spongebob into becoming assertive. Watching Plankton fail to make Spongebob assertive is very funny and satisfying, because while it might seem like he wants Spongebob to talk back to others so he can learn to say no, his real goal is to drive everyone away from Goo Lagoon so he can build a mega sand bucket. There are also some really funny jokes, like Plankton saying he only wanted one ice cream instead of two, or when Spongebob says to Scooter, "I'm going to tie your shoe," and he says, "But I'm wearing sandals," and Spongebob says, "Oh, it's alright." And this episode has this tapping on the beach meme. What I didn't like was that Plankton was really annoying here. I know his personality is being an evil character who hates everyone, but I didn't like, for example, when he made Lucille cry and says to Spongebob he was crying tears of joy because he had supposedly been assertive. And it gets tiresome having him constantly tell Spongebob to be assertive. Thought at least he doesn't get what he wants. And it can get a bit repetitive, and it could happen more interesting things than just watching Plankton try to make Spongebob assertive. Despite that, it's an enjoyable and funny episode, with a solid moral. But nothing truly stands out, so this one goes in A tier. Episode 19A, Fools in April. Fed up over Spongebob's liking of April Fool's Day, Squidward decides to play a nasty prank on him. Guys, please don't hate me for this, but I don't like this episode. I have to admit that the first half wasn't bad. In fact, it was fun. The pranks Spongebob pulls on people are funny and innocent, like the ice cubes in the drink, the spoon joke, or when he draws a funny face on his back while attending to a customer. But all of that is ruined because of the cruel prank Squidward plays on Spongebob because he annoyed him. I would have understood him doing that if Spongebob had actually deserved that, but no! His pranks never got tiresome. They were funny for both the viewer and the people that he pranked, and they even laughed along. And Spongebob even said to him that he isn't going to play any prank on him, yet Squidward still decides to humiliate him in front of everyone. I know that, unlike in Little Yellow Book from Season 9, Squidward feels bad for made Spongebob cry, but it's frustrating rather than heartwarming, because he struggles a lot to simply say to him that he's sorry, and instead of that, he tries to apologize indirectly by various ways, making it seem like he doesn't actually regret what he did to him. And when he finally decides to admit in SpongeBob's face that he's sorry, it turns out that everything was planned by SpongeBob and the other characters, since suddenly everyone appears inside SpongeBob's house and shouts, "April Fools!" It makes it seem like SpongeBob was never truly hurt by that prank, making the attempts of Squidward trying to say sorry to him feel like a waste of time. Since the first half was good and the second half was bad, and because I found a mix of pros and cons to the episode, I was planning to put it in C tier, but because the good elements end up being ruined, and the bad elements are very bad, and because I personally felt very frustrated during the second half, I put it in the upper side of D tier. It's not worse because there are some really funny jokes, and Squidward did at least apologize at the end. Episode 19b, Neptune's Spatula. Sponsor must prove to King Neptune that he's the royal fry cook material. I see this episode as a missed opportunity, because the premise is actually very innovative and interesting, and the episode could have been one of the best of the series, but the execution is kinda dull and unexciting. The only scene I found memorable was when SpongeBob faces off against King Neptune in the Krabby Patty making contest, because the visuals are truly incredible and striking, but the rest were very forgettable. There are some funny moments, like Patrick having his face very long his body for most of the time, or when Tom Kenny appears in the shower, but I don't think they're enough to make this episode good. This also marks King Neptune's first appearance in the series, and I think it's the worst character debut, at least for this season. He acts like a jerk here, laughing at SpongeBob and refusing to believe he was the one who lifted the spatula, even thought he was clearly holding it and he was standing up top the rock. I can understand that at first he didn't believe it was SpongeBob because, well, he doesn't exactly look very strong, but even after everyone saying to Neptune that it was him and he even got proof of that, he's still gonna admit it. Another thing I dislike is that he repeatedly electrocutes Patrick for no reason, and overall, I found his attitude very irritating. Also, I don't understand the reason why SpongeBob won the challenge just because his Krabby Patties tasted better than Neptune's, even though Neptune made more Krabby Patties than him. And the challenge was who could make more Krabby Patties, not who made them better. This episode had potential to be really good, but wasn't executed well. However, since there's still some funny moments and the visuals are excellent, I decided to place it in C tier. Also, as a fun fact, though it doesn't affect the rating, is that this episode is based on the movie The Sword in the Stone. Episode 28, Hooky. SpongeBob and Patrick play with fishing hooks. I wasn't sure where to put this episode in B tier or C tier, because on one hand, it has a good moral about heeding others' warnings, because bad things can happen to you if you don't listen to them, and it handles this in an original way involving fishing hooks, which that fits with the underwater setting of the series, and I like the various designs of the hooks and when the fisherman in live action appear. But on the other hand, I dislike how Mr. Krabs taught SpongeBob his lesson. It was cruel to use a fake hook and make SpongeBob believe he was literally going to die and end up in a gift shop, and he even put a Hell Wanted sign to scare him more. Not only that, but he also made him take off his clothes and make him feel embarrassed in front of Pearl and her friends. I also found Patrick a bad friend here, ignoring Mr. Krabs' warnings and convincing SpongeBob to keep playing with the hooks. But that works well to serve the episode's message. Also, this is Patrick's last appearance in this season, and we last see him inside a tuna can. We will remember you season 1, Patrick. I was first going to put this episode in C tier, since I also can't remember any joke that made me laugh. Seriously, I'm trying to remember one, but no one comes to mind. But since SpongeBob and Patrick learned their lesson, and it has a solid message made in a way that fits this show style, I decided to put it in B tier. At least it's better than the episodes that recycled this premise later on. Episode 20b, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. SpongeBob spends a day in the town with his heroes. I really like the action-packed tone of the episode. It feels more like a superhero episode than the first one of the saga, and we'll get to see more of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, such as the Mermaid or the first appearance of the Dirty Bubble. There are also funny moments, like Spongebob squirping, the atomic flounder, or the gag of Barnacle Boy getting involved by the invisible boatmobile's engine. However, what brought this episode down to B tier is that I didn't like SpongeBob's attitude here. Usually when in an episode a character gets annoying, it gets his karma later, but that doesn't happen here. We never seen SpongeBob really having the consequences for annoying Mermaid Man, and especially Barnacle Boy, calling them for stupid things and treating them like servants. Thought he didn't do that on purpose and he only wanted to spend time with his heroes. I also see this episode as a Barnacle Boy torture episode, since he suffers of having to put up with SpongeBob and Mermaid Man's stupidity. Now that I think of it, Barnacle Boy is like a human and superhero version of Squidward. Still, that only happens in the first half, and the episode later turns into a fun adventure about SpongeBob and his heroes, but it's not as good as the first Mermaid Man episode. And that is every episode of SpongeBob Season 1 reviewed. Before looking at the pie chart and giving this season a rating, I'm going to rank all the episodes from worst to best. Number 41, I Was a Teenage Gary. Number 40, Fools in April. Number 39, Nature Pants. Number 38, Neptune Spatula. Number 37, Jellyfishing. Number 36, Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. Number 35, Squeaky Boots. Number 34, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. Number 33, Nautical Neighbors. Number 32, Hooky. Number 31, Sandy's Rocket. Number 30, The Chaperone. Number 29, Valentine's Day. Number 28, Karate Choppers. Number 27, Suds. Number 26, Musclebob Buffpants. Number 25, Reef Blower. Number 24, Hall Monitor. Number 23, The Paper. Number 22, Walking Small. Number 21, Home Sweet Pineapple. Number 20, Tea at the Treedome. Number 19, Employee of the Month. Number 18, Rip Pants. Number 17, Boarding School. Number 16, Jellyfish Jam. Number 15, Plankton. Number 14, Bubblestand. Number 13, Help Wanted. Number 12, Sleepy Time. Number 11, Rock Bottom. Number 10, Arrgh. Number 9, Texas. Number 8, Scaredy Pants. Number 7, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Number 6, Opposite Day. Number 5, Pickles. Number 4, F.U.N. Number 3, Culture Shock. Number 2, Pizza Delivery. And number 1, SB129. Now let's see the chart. There are 14 episodes in S tier, 8 episodes in A tier, 12 episodes in B tier, 5 episodes in C tier, and 2 episodes in D tier. As you can see, most of this season is S tier material. However, it almost have the same amount of S and B tier episodes, and there's also some C and D tier ones, but actually the D tier episodes aren't that bad, and most of the C tier ones were close to being B tier. Also, 7 out of 41 episodes I don't consider to be good is not that bad. I was debating where to put this season, in S tier or A tier, but since the majority of the episodes are in S tier, and I overall really enjoy my experience watching it, I'm going to put it in the low side of S tier. There's still room for improvement, and if another season gets the S tier ranking, I don't see it hard to put it above this one. But I still find it a very enjoyable and funny season with very nice visuals and atmosphere. And as you probably noticed during the reviews, is that I have almost the same pros and cons for most of the episodes. So if I repeat myself in this video, I apologize for that. This is also considered by most fans to be the worst pre-movie season, which are seasons 1 through 3, so let's see if those other seasons, or maybe other ones, became better than this one. So that's my SpongeBob Season 1 review. Thank you for watching it, and I hope you enjoyed. This wasn't easy to make, because it's not only have to watch and rate the episodes, it's also the editing, writing the script and recording it. Please let me have all of your support, and I hope this series makes me grow on YouTube. I'm CARTOON-ATOR, and stay tuned for Season 2. Goodbye.